The north was colder than usual, the air heavy with the whispers of coming death. Jon Snow stood on the snowy walls of Winterfell, eyes fixed toward the white horizon. The Night King was no longer a tale meant to scare children. He was real, and he was coming. But unlike before, Jon wasn't alone in his thoughts. Bran Stark now, the three-eyed raven, had seen things no other man could. Tyrion Lannister, clever and cautious, had begun to connect every dot in the war strategy. And for the first time, these three minds would sit down together to plan not just a defense, but a path to survival. The first meeting took place in Winterfell's Great Hall. The torches burned low, and only the most trusted were allowed inside. Daenerys was away, gathering forces. Sansa, though strong-willed, was not invited to this discussion. Not yet. Jon looked to Bran. You said you saw something. Something important. Bran's voice was quiet, almost distant. The Night King doesn't want to just kill. He wants to erase. He's searching for me. He knows I'm the memory of this world. If I die, everything dies with me. Tyrion leaned forward, pouring himself some wine. That's deeply concerning, but not entirely surprising. If I were an undead monster king, I'd probably want to erase all evidence of my enemies too. Jon ignored the sarcasm. We need to find a way to stop him before he reaches Winterfell. Once he's here, the battle will be harder to control. Bran blinked slowly. He's headed toward the Godswood. That's where I need to be. And that's where he'll come. Tyrion rubbed his chin. So we use you as bait? Yes, Bran said simply. Jon's eyes flashed with anger. You think that's a good idea? Putting Bran out there, unprotected? Tyrion sighed. Not unprotected, guarded by the best we have. But Bran's right. If we can draw the Night King to one place, we might have a chance to destroy him. Jon shook his head. We tried that at Hardhome. We tried it again beyond the wall. Every time we've tried to face him directly, it's ended badly. This time, Bran said, we planned smarter. Tyrion nodded. We need a trap. Something the Night King doesn't expect. And so, the plan began to take shape. Bran would remain in the Godswood during the battle. Jon would lead the front line, but not recklessly. Tyrion would coordinate defense and fallback points, making sure every second of the battle was calculated. This war wasn't just about swords anymore. It was about minds, strategy, timing. They spent the next few days meeting in secret. Maps were spread out. Bran gave them knowledge of the Night King's patterns. Tyrion turned those visions into traps and positions. Jon ensured the fighters would be ready, placing trusted commanders like Ser Davos and Tormund at key points. But even as they prepared, doubts crept in. The enemy was not like any other. You couldn't reason with it. You couldn't bribe it. And for every man that died, the Night King's army grew stronger. Jon found himself walking with Bran late one night. Do you ever feel fear? Jon asked. Bran looked up at the stars. I feel everything, but I don't let it stop me. Jon nodded slowly. We might die. We might, Bran replied. But if we die with purpose, it means something. Tyrion joined them just as a raven flew overhead. We have 2 days, he said, out of breath. Scouts saw the undead army crossing the last hearth. They'll be here before we know it. Everything began to move faster. People were called back inside the castle. Food was gathered. Swords were sharpened. The dead were marching. And this time, Winterfell would not face them with blind hope. It would face them with a plan. The snowstorm rolled in with the same silence as death. On the edge of Winterfell's walls, soldiers stood in rows, watching the darkness stretch across the landscape. The enemy was still unseen, but everyone could feel it. A cold deeper than the wind had settled in their bones. The dead were close. Inside the castle, the final touches of the plan were underway. Tyrion walked quickly through the halls, passing nervous guards and pale-faced villagers. He made his way to the war room, where Jon and Bran were already waiting. Bran sat still, eyes blank, skin pale as ice. He had warged into ravens again, flying over the enemy's path. Jon turned to Tyrion. "Well?" Tyrion gave a tired nod. "Everything's in place. The trenches are filled with dragon glass, the archers are ready, and our catapults are loaded. But I'll be honest with you, Jon. This will still be a slaughter." Jon's jaw tightened. "That's why we need to make the Night King come to the Godswood. Everything else is a distraction." Suddenly, Bran's eyes rolled back into focus. He gasped, his voice shaky. "He's coming faster. He knows what we're doing." Jon looked confused. "How?" "I don't know," Bran said. "But he's changed his route. He's not taking the usual path. He's avoiding fire. He's learning." Tyrion's face darkened. "Wonderful. An ancient undead monster king who learns from his mistakes. That's exactly what we need." Jon turned away. "We stick to the plan. No changes. We fight with what we have." But that night, the unexpected happened. As Jon prepared to brief the commanders on their positions, Ghost, his direwolf, growled loudly from the shadows. Jon turned just in time to see Samwell Tarly running toward him, nearly falling over his own feet. "Jon, you need to see this," Sam gasped. "What is it?" Sam held out a torn piece of parchment. A raven came from the citadel. Old records, something about Bran, about the Night King. Tyrion leaned in as Jon snatched the paper. "What does it say?" Sam hesitated. Bran might not just be a target. He might be connected to him. There's an old tale. The first three-eyed raven was once a man who tried to stop the Night King by warging into him. But something went wrong. Ever since then, every three-eyed raven has been a threat to the Night King's power. Jon looked at Bran, who didn't even flinch. "Is this true?" Bran blinked. "I don't know. But it makes sense." Tyrion stepped back, his mind racing. "So he doesn't just want to kill Bran. He wants to destroy what Bran represents. Knowledge, memory, history. That's not just war, it's annihilation." Jon's face was pale. "Then we cannot lose Bran, no matter what." At dawn, the horns of Winterfell screamed through the frost. The army of the dead had arrived. A sea of white and blue eyes stretched from one end of the horizon to the other. Giants walked among them. Whites crawled like insects. The Night King flew above on his dead dragon, Viserion, his eyes fixed toward the Godswood. The first wave of fire was released. Flaming arrows rained down on the undead, setting many ablaze. The trenches burned, slowing their charge, but not stopping them. From the walls, Tyrion watched, heart pounding. Now it begins. Jon, mounted on Rhaegal, flew low above the battlefield, watching the Night King's moves carefully. He didn't engage. Not yet. Down below, Arya darted through the shadows, her daggers ready. The Hound guarded the eastern wall. Brienne, Podrick, and Jain stood shoulder to shoulder at the main gate. And deep within the Godswood, surrounded by a ring of elite fighters, sat Bran calm, eyes rolled back, mind flying through ravens above the chaos. But just as the plan seemed to be working, a second surprise came. A part of the undead army broke away from the main force, moving around the trenches, heading not toward Bran, but toward the crypts of Winterfell. Tyrion's face went white. "Oh no, Dot the dead below?" Jon's voice echoed from above. "He's raising everyone, even the ones buried beneath us." Winterfell wasn't just under attack from outside anymore. It was about to be attacked from within. Screams echoed from beneath Winterfell. The crypts, once believed to be the safest place for the weak and helpless, had become a death trap. The Night King had raised the dead, buried in the ancient tombs, Starks long gone. Now mindless wights with rotten faces and cold rage in their eyes. Women and children cried for help as the stone walls trembled with chaos below. Tyrion was already halfway down the steps when Varys grabbed his arm. "You'll die down there." Tyrion pulled free. "They'll die without someone who can think." Down in the crypts, the dead were tearing through the shadows, their ancient bones cracking with each step. Sansa and Missandei tried to protect the children, holding them back against the walls. Tyrion arrived just as one of the old Stark corpses lunged forward, its broken jaw hanging open. Without thinking, Tyrion plunged a dagger into its eye, panting hard. Not how I imagined meeting the ancestors. Back above ground, the outer wall of Winterfell was cracking. The undead had used their sheer weight to crush through the burning trenches. Giant Whites led the charge, smashing through wooden defenses as chaos spread. Jon flew on Rhaegal, trying to intercept the Night King, who hovered nearby on Viserion. The two dragons circled each other high in the sky, like vultures over a battlefield. Snow and fire danced around them, and with a sudden roar, the Night King dove first. Jon braced himself. The dragons clashed mid-air with terrifying force flames, and frost exploding in all directions. Rhaegal bit into Viserion's neck, while the dead dragon let out a screech that cracked the sky. Below them, the battle raged on, but the real fight, the only fight that mattered, was happening between them. In the Godswood, Theon Greyjoy stood ready with his men. Bran remained still, lost in visions. He could see everything, every scream, every death, every secret. He saw the past, and something new. A flash, a vision of the Night King. As a man who once begged the children of the forest not to turn him. A man who cried before he became a monster. Bran gasped. He remembers. Theon turned. What? He remembers what it was to be human, Bran whispered. That's his weakness. But it was already too late for reasoning. On the battlefield, Arya raced across rooftops, dodging fallen beams and arrows. She had seen the army split and knew something was wrong. The dead were inside the walls. She leapt down silently, her feet barely touching the ground, and landed near the crypt entrance. Blood trailed down the stone steps. She slipped inside just in time to save Sansa, stabbing a White through the head. Sansa stared at her, shocked. Arya handed her a dragonglass blade. Stick them with the pointy end. You came back, Sansa said, breathless. I never left. Meanwhile, Jon and the Night King fought in the sky like gods from old legends. But even as Rhaegal burned Viserion's wings, the Night King didn't fall. He leapt from the dragon mid-air and landed on the ground, unharmed. He began walking slowly toward the Godswood. Jon saw him and gave chase, diving down with Rhaegal. But a sudden cloud of snow and ice exploded from the Night King's path, forcing Jon back. The plan was working. The Night King was heading straight for Bran, but so were his lieutenants, the White Walkers in armor of ice, each with swords sharp enough to cut through steel. Tyrion, bloodied and limping, finally made it out of the crypts. We held them off, but we lost too many. Arya appeared beside him. We need to get to Bran, now. Jon landed in the courtyard and saw the White Walkers advancing. He shouted to his men, Hold them back. We need more time. And time was almost gone. Inside the Godswood, Theon's men were already dead. Theon stood alone now, bloodied and shaking, holding his spear. Bran looked at him softly. You've done enough. You're a good man, Theon. Theon's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. And then the Night King stepped into the circle of trees. His eyes locked with Bran's. The battle had reached its final stage. The Night King moved with slow, silent steps across the snow-covered ground of the Godswood. The trees, red with weeping faces, stood still like witnesses of fate. Theon stood between him and Bran, his hands shaking around the spear, but his feet rooted with purpose. He knew this moment would be his last. The Night King didn't speak. He never did. His pale eyes looked past Theon, right at Bran, as if Theon was nothing but a small delay. And yet Theon charged. With a cry filled with everything he had guilt, rage, shame, love, he ran forward, spear aimed at the heart of death itself. The Night King shattered it in a blink. Theon's body hit the ground hard, his last breath escaping in silence. Bran blinked, unmoving, his face still calm, as if he already knew. Then the Night King stepped in front of him. Winterfell, meanwhile, had become a storm of fire and ice. Whites poured over the walls. Brienne was bleeding, holding off 3 at once. Jaime had fallen, dragging himself with one arm. Sam fought like a man who never wanted to pick up a sword but had no choice anymore. Even Gendry was out of weapons, using his fists to punch through bone and frost. Jon Snow raced toward the Godswood on foot. Rhaegal had collapsed, wings broken. The battle in the sky was over, and now the ground would decide everything. He ran through the dying courtyard, swinging Longclaw, cutting down anything in his way. His face was burned. His hands were numb. But his mind screamed one thing: Bran. Tyrion, still bleeding from the crypts, stumbled after him with Arya, both pushing toward the same direction. "If we don't stop him now," Tyrion panted, "nothing else will matter." In the Godswood, time felt frozen. The Night King stood before Bran, looking down at the boy who knew everything. Slowly, he reached for his sword. Bran looked up at him and said the one thing no one expected: "I remember you." The Night King paused. "I remember who you were," Bran continued, "before they made you into this. You didn't want to become a weapon." The Night King's face twitched for the first time in 1,000 years. But whatever humanity was left in him died in that second. He raised his sword, ready to finish it. And just then, a whisper of wind. A blur through the trees. Arya. She flew from the shadows like a ghost, her face filled with fury and fear. She leapt with her Valyrian steel dagger raised, but the Night King turned. He caught her mid-her by the throat. The world seemed to stop. Bran didn't blink. Arya struggled in his grip, her dagger slipping from her hand, but landing perfectly in her other. She stabbed him, right in the heart, right where the children of the forest first placed the dragonglass when they created him. The Night King's eyes widened. He took a breath, not a real one, but a reflex from the man he used to be. Then he exploded into ice. In an instant, his lieutenants shattered. Outside, every white stopped, then collapsed. The battlefield went silent. Jon dropped to his knees, staring at the piles of dead crumbling into dust. Brienne looked up, blood on her face, realizing she was still alive. Tyrion leaned against a wall, tears in his eyes. She did it? Gods, she did it? Arya gasped for breath in the Godswood, her hand shaking, covered in frozen blood. Bran finally moved. "You were always meant to be the one," he whispered. She looked at him, confused and breathless. "I didn't know." "I did," Bran said softly. And then it was over. The long night had ended. But victory never comes without a price. Bodies were everywhere. And deep inside, Jon knew something still didn't feel right. The living had won, but the game was not over. The fires burned through the night, not to fight the dead anymore, but to burn them. Winterfell stood silent as the survivors dragged bodies out by the dozens. Friends, brothers, sisters, all gone. The air smelled of ash, blood, and sorrow. The dead were defeated, but the cost had been unimaginable. Jon Snow stood at the wall, watching the sky turn gray. His face was blank, his eyes distant. He couldn't stop replaying everything: the dragons, Theon's last stand, Arya's silent strike, and Bran's strange calm. Everyone was praising Arya, calling her a hero. She deserved it. But Jon couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone. Too perfectly. In the great hall, the survivors gathered. Daenerys had returned with her forces, just after the battle ended. She was furious at being left out of the final plan. "You risked everything without me," she hissed at Jon. "We didn't have time to wait," he replied. "If we had, Bran would be dead." Tyrion tried to calm the tension. "What matters is that we won." But Daenerys wasn't listening. Her eyes burned with something darker than grief. Jealousy. She had come to break the wheel, to be the savior. But Arya quiet, nameless Arya was now the face of victory. As the meeting ended, Bran rolled his chair forward. He looked at Jon. "We need to talk," he said softly. They sat alone in the godswood, the snow falling again like a soft curtain. Jon waited, but Bran didn't speak immediately. His eyes turned white. He warged again. When he returned, his voice was colder than the wind. "The war may be over, but the game is starting again." Jon frowned. "What game?" Bran looked straight at him. "The Game of Thrones." Jon shook his head. "I don't want it." "It doesn't matter what you want," Bran said. "You have the blood of the dragon and the wolf. You're Aegon Targaryen. You are the rightful king." Jon stood up. "I fought for the living, not for a crown. But Daenerys is not what she seems," Bran whispered. "I saw her future." Jon froze. Bran's voice dropped lower. "Fire, death, cities burning. She will become what her father once was." Jon wanted to deny it, but deep down he had seen it too. The way she looked at him now, the way she talked about ruling, about bending the knee, about fear. Tyrion joined them a moment later. "There's unrest already. Northmen don't trust her." The people saw Arya save the world. Sansa's whispering to the lords. "The wheel isn't broken. It's just turning again." Bran said, "It's time we break it for real." Jon stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Bran replied, "we must make a choice before she does." Meanwhile, in Daenerys' chambers, she stood before a table covered in pieces of parchment. Letters from across the realm. All with one message. The North will never kneel again. She slammed her hand on the table. "They don't love me." "They never will," Missandei whispered. "They will, in time." "No," Dany muttered. "They already love someone else." She looked out the window, her eyes cold, burning with purpose. "Jon, she wouldn't let anyone take her destiny. Not now, not ever." That night, Sansa met secretly with Tyrion. "If we don't act soon," she whispered, "Daenerys will burn her way to the throne." Tyrion nodded. "And Jon's too honorable to see it." "Then maybe," Sansa said coldly, "he shouldn't be the one to decide." Plans were being made again. Secrets traded like coins. Loyalties questioned. The dead were gone, but the game had returned. And this time, it would be even deadlier. Winterfell, once the heart of the North's pride, had become a nest of whispers. Every corner held secrets now. The war with the dead had ended, but something darker had taken root. Doubt in Daenerys. Doubt in Jon. Doubt in peace. Arya watched from the shadows. She noticed it in the way soldiers talked under their breath, in the way northern lords bowed but kept their hands on their swords. She noticed it most in Sansa, whose eyes no longer softened around Daenerys. "She will not stop," Sansa told her behind closed doors. "She wants to rule by fire, not by love." Arya didn't respond at first. She had seen too much death to take sides easily. But she didn't forget what Cersei had done. And she saw that same ambition now flickering behind Daenerys' eyes. At the same time, Daenerys was losing control. She spent more time alone in the dragon's chambers, whispering to Drogon like he was the only one who understood her. Jon's distance was cutting deep. She had tried to hold him, to remind him they were allies, lovers, maybe even rulers together, but he had changed. He wouldn't call her queen anymore. He wouldn't look at her the same. And when she tried to speak of the future, he changed the subject. She knew. He was afraid of her. One evening, Tyrion approached Jon in the snow-covered courtyard. "She's watching you." Closely. Jon turned. "I don't care about the crown. I've said it 100 times. Tyrion looked tired. "It's not about what you care about. It's about what others believe. That alone is dangerous." Jon's voice dropped. "I'd never hurt her. But she might hurt you. Tyrion said gently. Or worse. She might hurt everyone to protect her throne. That night, the council gathered again. Sansa, Tyrion, Arya, Bran, and a few loyal northern lords met in secret. We cannot wait, Sansa said. The longer we do, the more power she gains. She still has 2 dragons, Arya added, and an army. She won't burn Winterfell, Jon said quietly from the corner. Everyone turned. He had entered silently, eyes shadowed, jaw clenched. She won't hurt the North, he repeated. Sansa's voice cracked. She's already heard it. She destroyed Varys for speaking the truth. She burns her enemies alive. She doesn't lead Jon. She conquers. Jon sat down slowly, rubbing his face. She's not the enemy. Bran spoke for the first time. She will be. I saw it, Arya asked. Then what do we do? The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. No one dared say it. Not yet. But everyone was thinking the same thing. Meanwhile, Daenerys sat in her room staring at a map of Westeros. Missandei entered and said softly, "The people are restless." Dany didn't respond. Missandei tried again. Jon is still loyal. He just needs time. Daenerys finally looked at her. Time won't change who he is. He was never mine. He belongs to them. Missandei hesitated. And if they push him to take the throne? Dany stared down at the map. I will burn every castle in this land before I let another man steal what is mine. Outside, the snow began falling again, soft, slow, hiding the blood that was soon to be spilled, because plans were being made, and someone was going to die. The snow was falling heavy now, like the sky itself was mourning what was about to happen. Inside the halls of Winterfell, the final plan had been made, spoken in whispers, sealed with silence. It was a betrayal, yes, but to some, it felt like mercy. To others, justice. To Jon Snow, it felt like death. He stood by Bran's tree in the Godswood, the same place where the world had almost ended. His breath misted in the cold as Arya stepped out from behind a trunk. She'll never stop, Jon. Jon didn't look at her. She believes it's her destiny. Arya's voice was quiet, but sharp. So did her father. Jon turned sharply. She's not the Mad King. Arya stepped closer. Not yet. He stared at her. You want me to kill her? Arya shook her head. No, I'll do it if you can't. Jon's heart twisted. He had fought White Walkers, battled dead men, lost friends, bled for peace. This felt different. This wasn't war. This was choosing who deserved to rule, and the choice would kill someone he once loved. Later that night, Daenerys waited alone in the great hall. Her silver hair was loose, eyes red from lack of sleep. The war was won. The dead were gone. Yet peace still felt distant. She kept waiting for someone to thank her, for someone to love her without fear. But all she saw were northern lords who flinched at her name and whispered Jon's behind closed doors. She heard the footsteps behind her. She smiled, just slightly. You came. Jon walked in, wearing the black cloak of the Night's Watch, his past. His reminder. I needed to talk to you, he said. Daenerys turned. You look at me like I'm a stranger now. Jon's voice cracked. You burned Varys alive. He betrayed me, she said coldly. He told the truth, Jon replied. She stepped closer. I am the only one who can make this world better. They hate me because I don't belong to their houses, because I'm not a man. Jon swallowed. You could rule with love, not fear. Daenerys' eyes filled with fire. Love? You're the only one I ever loved here. And even you have turned away from me. She stepped to him now, placing her hands on his chest. Let's do it together. You and I. Jon looked at her, eyes full of pain. His hand reached to touch hers. Their foreheads touched. A breath passed between them, almost like a prayer. And then he stabbed her. A soft gasp escaped her lips. She stepped back, eyes wide. Blood bloomed on her chest like a red rose in the snow. Jon caught her as she fell. "Forgive me." Her hand reached for his face one last time, and dropped. She died in his arms, the last dragon queen. Drogon felt it. From the far end of the battlefield where he slept among bones, his head snapped up. He screeched, a howl that shattered the night. Within minutes, the giant beast was above Winterfell, circling, crying, fire in his throat. Jon stood beside her body, waiting to die. But Drogon didn't kill him. Instead, the dragon landed next to his mother's corpse, and wept. Then, with fire bursting from his heart, he melted the iron throne that had been brought north after the war, a twisted metal lie that had ruined too many lives. The throne turned to liquid. Then Drogon picked up Daenerys' body gently in his claw and flew away into the dark sky. Gone. The next morning, silence covered Winterfell like snow. No songs were sung. No heroes were cheered. Arya stood beside Jon as he waited for judgment from the northern lords. Sansa, cold as winter, looked at him with something between pride and sorrow. Bran spoke softly from his chair. "You did what you had to do," Jon replied, "and I'll pay for it." He was ready to be executed, exiled, forgotten. But Bran simply said, "You'll return to the Night's Watch." Jon blinked. "It doesn't exist anymore." "It will," Bran said. "It must. There must always be someone in the dark, watching for the return of the long night." Tyrion stepped forward. "No crown, no title, no songs. But the world survives because of your choice. And so?" Jon Snow left again, back to the cold, back to the wall, back to nothing, but not alone. Ghost was waiting. Tormund met him at the gates, and behind him a new dawn began. Back in the hall, the lords turned to Bran. Sansa spoke. "We need a ruler." Tyrion looked around the room. "Then let it be the one who carries the memory of everything, the one who has no desire for power, only to protect it." They all looked at Bran. He didn't smile. He only nodded. And so Bran the Broken was crowned. Not the king they wanted, but maybe the one they needed.